armed guards and a few tents to sleep in. With nothing now to do, they stood quietly, looking out at the bustle round about, at the stores moved steadily on, and the casualties brought back to the hospital next door. The field hospital had been set up in an abandoned refrigeration plant, and the wounded rushed to it by helicopter, some from Goose Green, some from more forward positions. Most were Argentinian, some were British. They got the same treatment. Surgeon Commander Rick Jolly, who showed us round, had a proud boast. Everybody who'd reached his hospital alive had left alive. Around the edges of the building, men on makeshift beds waited until they were fit to move on to the hospital ship Uganda. The space here was needed. There cannot be continued fighting without many more dead and wounded. And more fighting, it seems, there must be. Canberra has returned to San Carlos Water to disembark another 2,000 troops, a part of the 5th Infantry Brigade. The Guards, who had begun their voyage from England in the QE2, finished it in landing craft, moving across the misty bay to advance forward, taking over from the troops already holding the grounds. All day there was a steady march of men, fresh men, ready for combat. This new landing, every bit as great as the first wave, doubled the number of troops ashore. Their arrival gave the British command a chance to regroup and, for the first time, outnumber the Argentine defenders. By now, so many troops and supplies had come ashore that the beach and the tracks were a morass of mud, evidence of the weight of the British advance. But there's no intention of getting stuck in First World War trench warfare. The Gurkhas are already here, digging in across the island. Some of their forward positions are within sight of Port Stanley. The advance continues. That's the end of the ENG bit. Can you hold? This next section is for the 3 rolls of amateur film, which we include in. There's a note which gives the name of the woman who provided it, and every effort should be made to return it to her, obviously. We're given an address in England, which it can be sent to. And she'd like a cassette, please, VHS, of this package and her film, if you could provide that as well, plus whatever fees. I would suggest if anybody apart from BBC and ITN use it, they should negotiate separate fees. Maybe Chris Kramer, who seems to be very good at this sort of thing, could negotiate something on her behalf. I think one could say safely that Viz News can't have it for free. This is a blind script. It's just a few paragraphs, which you may or may not find helpful to use or to put my voice on, depending on how you want to play it. The islanders' view of the surrender was a distant one. From the hall where they'd been held for a month, they could just see the parade of Argentine soldiers and the watching paratroopers. The paras had been astonished at the number of Argentines. The islanders' view of the surrender was a distant one. From the hall where they'd been... Third time lucky. The islanders' view of the surrender was a distant one. From the hall where they'd been held for a month, they could just see the parade of Argentine soldiers and the watching paratroopers. The paras had been astonished at the number of Argentinians who came to surrender. They expected to count hundreds, not over 1,000. The end came with a parade, a political speech, and a rather halting attempt to sing the national anthem. Then they dropped their arms, and the British flag was raised. Afterwards, the paratroopers came on to Goose Green to be greeted as liberators. The islanders left the hall and rushed forward to cheer them. These pictures were taken... Afterwards, the paratroopers came on to Goose Green to be greeted as liberators. The islanders left the hall and rushed forward to cheer them. These pictures were taken by Mrs. Gray, who lives in Goose Green with her husband and 2 children. Despite their ill treatment, none of the islanders had been physically hurt, and they all turned out to show their appreciation of the men who'd fought so hard to free them. There were gifts, and perhaps more welcome, shelter from the biting cold of the surrounding mountains. The settlement was a mess. There was litter and debris everywhere. Military stores and ammunition had been abandoned all over the place. Guns and other equipment had been sited around the houses, using the civilian population as a shield against air attack.